Hello, everybody. It is March the 20th, 8 o'clock UK time. If you're tuning in, it's great to see you. I can't believe it's been another month already since the last one. And if you're tuning in, this is Howard Cooper. Oh, we've got 11 people already tuned in, waiting there for this. So look, as you know the score, everyone. I do this every time, which is at the moment I'm just talking to an empty room. I'm looking at a screen and I have no idea whether people can hear or see me. So if you can, please let me know in the comments that you can see, you can hear me, and it's coming across loud and clear. Otherwise, my fear is I'm just going to be sitting here chatting to a room by myself for an hour before I realise. So please let me know in the comments that we are live and that you can see and hear me all right. And this is where there's always a delay. Oh, someone says, I see, I hear. Thank you. Thank you, Martin. You have rested my mind at ease. So that means that we're all good. Yeah. So someone says they're in Minneapolis. Sounds great. Excellent. Oh, Helen Martin. Thank you. Well done. Welcome. Welcome. Lots of people. Lots of great. Oh, I'm seeing. Hello, Hayden. Martin. Good to see you. Let me know whereabouts in the world you are. Indiana, USA. Gosh, we've got people all over the shop. Brigitte from Sweden. Hello again. Oh, and Edinburgh. Okay. A fully international crowd. I know what you're thinking, by the way. You are thinking, I did promise a guest. I did promise that you wouldn't be just sitting here looking at my face, my bearded, wonderful face. And despite that, oh, here we go. We've got Timothy in Cardiff, Dundee. There we go. Perfect. Oh, look, absolutely brilliant. I'm so pleased that you could all join. But yes, I did promise there would be someone joining me. And we do. We have a special guest because it's nice to have some input from some other voices with different ideas and different impact. So I'm going to bring out. Here she is. I'm going to introduce. She's giggling. I don't know whether you can hear her yet. I'm going to bring onto the screen now someone. Her name is Melissa Tears, and I'm not going to ask her to introduce herself because I think that would be quite frankly rude. But Melissa, first of all, welcome to the YouTube Live.
Thanks for bringing me out.
It's absolutely bringing you out. Yeah, absolutely. Perfect. Now, look, I'm not going to make her introduce herself because that would obviously be rude, but I'm going to tell you a little bit about her. I came across Melissa first about 4 or 5 years ago, something like that. I was at the UK Hypnosis Convention, and there was someone.
That was longer than 5 years.
Was it longer than 5 years? Oh man.
Yeah. Well,
crikey.
Because we had the COVID time.
Oh my God! About 8 years ago, 9 years ago, something like that. Okay, yeah. Put it this way, I had no beard, and if I did, it would have been jet black back then. Clean shaven, probably. Who knows? So 8-9 years ago, I watched her do a presentation, and I was just blown away. I'm gonna. There are a number of people in the industry that I've come across, and when I hear them speak, I always think, and I've just grabbed this from my desk, I always think it sounds a little bit like they're selling snake oil. However, Melissa was one of these like rare finds, and the way you spoke and you backed everything up with neuroscience, and it was just so insightful and so interesting in terms of practical suggestions that of how to help people, often with anxiety, and they were solution-focused ideas. That's what I loved. It was like, from being on the coalface of doing this for years and years and years and years and years, how can we actually help people with stuff that works? So that's kind of why I wanted to, so interested in bringing her out. We connected a few times. She came on my podcast. We've played Words with Friends repeatedly over the years. And she's also written the Anti-Anxiety Toolkit, which she says it's more like a pamphlet, a leaflet.
Yeah.
I think it's a book, because you buy it in a bookstore. You don't buy it in a pamphlet store. So that's my metric.
You know, I wrote it mainly as the thing that I handed to all of my clients, right? And it was just me getting tired of having to repeat myself over and over again. So I put it all in what was basically essentially a pamphlet. And then some of my students were like, I think you need to sell this as a book. And then I just let one of my students do what they wanted with it, and that's how it became a book. But anyway,
I love it.
I'm glad you like it, and a lot of people get relief. The idea, and I think maybe your people will appreciate this. The idea was, I wanted you to be able to pick it up and within 3 minutes get out of anxiety.
So it was cut to the chase. It was absolutely like immediately, here, take this, do this, here, try this, here, notice where it is in your body and do this. And there's enough in there that you're going to get relief. So yeah, I'm glad you liked it.
Absolutely. I think that's brilliant. And someone just said that your microphone was rubbish, but I clicked a button and now it's better. So we sorted it.
Oh, okay,
See
good.
what happens? I love that. It gets sorted. There we go. Okay, yes. So Melissa, it's all working. She's here. We've got through the awkward introducing yourself bit. Fairly all right. That's all right. But look, so here's the rules of engagement, everybody. I have, as you know, we want to get questions from you guys. What specifically would you like help with in terms of anxiety? What's causing you to get stressed? Are you freaking out about anything particularly? Do you have any other issues around personal development that you would just like some insight around? Anything that's holding you back? It would be really, really good to hear and get your questions. In the meantime, while you're thinking about that, as always, before these, I go on and I see recent comments on YouTube. Has anyone posted anything interesting, any interesting questions? And it's always good to get those. And I've had some people, what's the word? Pre-submit, that's the word. Pre-submit. That would score 24 on Words with Friends. Pre-submit. And so we have some questions as well. So let's dive in while we've got a few questions coming in. The first one is this one here. I'll read it out in case you're struggling to read it, because it might be small where you are seeing. Tips on how to get those negative anxiety-causing thoughts out of your mind. How do we break the cycle?
Okay.
So go on, Melissa.
Is that one for me?
Yeah, well, why don't you dive in, and then I'll throw in my 2 pennies worth afterwards as well, if there's anything I can.
So I mean, there's a bunch of different ways, and we're going to make this real practical, and I'll just give you some techniques. I don't know if you guys are seeing a lag. I know that we had to jerry rig this thing where we're on Zoom and he's got another camera, because for me, there's at least a 3-second, 4-second lag. So somebody comment, which I can't even see those comments, if that's true. Anyway, first for me, right, anything thought with repetition, felt with repetition, done with repetition becomes a habituated pattern. So for me, anxiety is essentially a habit. It's a habit of the brain. And so the first thing that I do is I look to how can we interrupt what the brain is doing? How can we thwart the habituated pattern and foster, new neural connections? And when it comes to the thoughts that are linked to the anxiety, some of my favorites, here's one. I always share this one with almost every client because it's one of my go-to personal techniques. I call it shift out and shut the fuck up.
Oh, I
I just realized we're on YouTube. We can curse, yeah. Anyway,
Fuck
shift
yeah.
out and shut up. And it's this one. So if everyone just watching would just find a focal point, just focus there in the center. And without moving your eyes, begin to expand your awareness into your peripheral field. So without moving your eyes, kind of lean into this peripheral visual field as if you could be aware of the walls on either side of you. Kind of expanding peripherally, as if you could even like reach beyond the walls or reach for all that space behind you. Just allowing that peripheral vision to kind of open up. And then bring it back into focus. Now, I teach this mainly for two reasons. One is by accessing, right, peripheral vision, you start to stimulate the parasympathetic nervous system, right? So it's a down regulation of your nervous system into relaxation mode, basically. But the beautiful thing about this one is it tends to stop internal dialogue, right? Don't know why, but it does. And most cultures have some form of this. So shifting into peripheral vision, that's why I call it shift out and shut up, is one of my go-to pattern interrupts. Now, many people that I work with, and I've been helping people with anxiety for almost 30 years, if they don't make a different choice, they tend to come back to the same messed up pattern, right?
Mm-hmm.
So from an expanded awareness state, from this peripheral, when you come back in, you have a choice. So I give people little snippets, little thoughts to interrupt that change the brain. And one of them is, I come back in and I think, what's not that? Right? Which is a short version of a pattern interrupt I teach my clients, which is what's everything I'm not noticing that's not that. And I tend to use, that's right. I tend to use that double negation because it does a few things. So I'll say it again. And this one comes from my good friend, John Overdurf. He's like the wizard when it comes to nonlinear language patterns.
Mm-hmm.
Here's why this one works. First, feel it for those of you listening, right? So if you're feeling anxiety, typically I would do a maneuver, right? Whether it's what I just taught you or whether it's where is it in my body, right? Solidify it, bring it down to a kinesthetic where it takes it out of the idea, the idea realm, brings it down into something kinesthetic. So where is it in my body? From here, I teach my clients to do many things. But for what we're talking about, once you isolate it, you think to yourself something along the lines of what's everything I'm not noticing that's not that. What that does, feel it, right? Feel what it does. So for those of you that have thought loops, a question with that type of negation, because it's nonlinear, and what I mean by that is, what's everything I'm not noticing that's not that? Well, that would be everything. And so the left brain, the linear, sequential, the brain that is, looping those thoughts gets thrown offline because it can't answer a question like that. Mm-hmm. So it throws it to the right brain, which is more global, which can process things simultaneously. But really, it's just to interrupt what your brain was doing. What's everything I'm not noticing that's not that? Now, a short version of that is, what's not that? So from peripheral, sometimes people will just use that to stop the thoughts, to downregulate the system, and then they go about their day, and that's fine too. If you need a little bit more help because you're about to snap back into that bullshit thought loop you got going on, that's when something like what's not that, it widens out consciousness. It brings it into this inductive type of processing, right?
Love it.
So peripheral vision is one of my favorite ways to stop a thought loop. The other one would be to relax the back of your tongue. Take a deep breath in, hold it, and then exhale twice as long. Do it again. Deep breath in, hold it, and exhale twice as long with relaxing the back of your tongue. Right. And if you're watching, Howard, you'll see what happens. The same two key elements of what I just shared, which is by relaxing the back of the tongue, you tend to send less impulses to the language centers of the brain.
Right.
By then taking a deep breath in and exhaling twice as long, you downregulate the nervous system through the vagus nerve. And so you do 2 or 3 of those and you'll feel a little stoned. You know what I mean?
I wouldn't
So those
know.
are those are 2 that come to mind.
Yep.
Other than the techniques that I use that will challenge the thought loops, that will, if they're thought loops that have a real negative feeling attached to them, sometimes we lighten it up just by hearing the thought loops from different places or in different voices. What happens if you speed it up? What happens if you slow it down? What happens if you hear that same thought loop in Minnie Mouse's voice?
Love it.
Try this, everybody, because you can't really know how it works until you try it. So take a moment and think of one of those thoughts that kind of the shitty self-talk, right? That maybe is linked to the anxiety or linked to feeling not so good. As you allow yourself to hear it, just notice, where is it coming from? And when I say that, I mean like, not my childhood. No, I mean, where is it coming from? Like, is it to the right? Is it to the left? Does it feel like it's coming from in front of you, behind you? Like, if you had to point to it, everyone watching, just point to, where is that coming from? Yes. And if you were watching Howard, he showed you before he pointed. If you're a practitioner on here, you would notice that. So now take it and drag it to the other side and try and hear it. And we're just playing here. Just notice what that does.
So someone wrote
Right.
inside. It's coming from inside.
Okay, so now bring it outside and hear it. Because I can't seem to see those comments. Now, hear it in, like I use Minnie Mouse because it's easy, right? Hear it in Minnie Mouse's voice or some other ridiculous voice, right? They're going to laugh at me.
That's good. That was a good voice.
I just can't do it. Or I'm just like my father. Whatever the fuck. Right? So notice what it does. Hear it in that ridiculous voice. And then tell me in the comments, or rather tell Howard, who can tell me what that was like for you in the comments.
I really like that. I love that. And there's always a delay while they do that.
Right. There's always just, so those are like 3 different things that come to mind that are easy to mess with. One of the big things is when you start to mess with the anxiety in any way, shape, or form, you're dragging what is typically an unconscious strategy that you're running, and you're dragging it into the light of consciousness. And already the dynamic will change. Some of you might have noticed that just by using a technique or even just being mindful of something like, okay, here is this anxiety. I'm noticing it. I'm noticing what it's doing here. And that puts you in this observer position. Now, the other thing that most people, right, that most people don't tell you is that you've got a really short shelf life for any negative emotional spike. 90 seconds. Most, it's less. So 90 seconds is what you have when you have a biochemical wash of emotion. It typically peaks and then flows away. That's why when people just practice mindfulness, if they can practice mindfulness for 90 seconds, and be like, there is anger, there is anxiety. Okay, it's diminishing. But that's not what we do because we're so good at keeping our bullshit together. So what we do is the 90-second of anxiety peaks. And as it's going to flow away, what do? We're like, I can't freaking believe they did that. And we keep, as my friend John would say, throwing logs on the fire.
Right.
So as soon as we have the spike in anxiety and then it starts to flow out and then you start to you have another worry, right? Oh my God, how can I get out of, how dare they do, why the fuck did I, right? And that's how we keep it going. So any one of the techniques that I teach, Howard, you probably taught them bilateral stimulation.
I may have done that once or twice. Yep.
Right? So anything that you can do it for 90 seconds, right? Ride out the anxiety. And then have key things in place. I just did something on Instagram yesterday where I was talking about, the proper use of your butt.
Yes. Have I told you my demographic?
And it's basically, utilizing the fact that the word but tends to negate everything that comes before it. And I was just going on a little rant because of how doctors will, unknowingly deliver negative hypnotic suggestions because they don't know where to put their butt. But I was sharing that I use it, and this is still speaking to the same question. I use it for my internal dialogue.
Oh, I love
right?
that.
As someone who escaped to Mexico in January, I'm from New York City, but now is faced with the needing to go home. I have a lot of anxiety and internal dialogue, and anyone who's paying attention to the world in whatever part of the world you're in, sometimes things, anxiety is the normal response to a crazy fucking world. And so first, know that it's a normal response. Welcome to the reality of it. Then know how to thwart it. So I'll read an article and I'll be like, oh my God, this is the fucking end. And then immediately I've trained my brain to go, but maybe it isn't, right? But maybe something good is coming. But maybe we needed a shakeup. Whatever the but is, but will negate what I just thought before it.
I love that.
So try on a but. And
you heard it here first.
Those are some of the ways I would answer that that question.
I love all of those so much, and there's just so much to unpack there. But I like I want to share a technique with everybody, which I used to use a lot with kids, called the silly story technique, where we start with something that's scary. They start by saying, I'm really worried that a monster's coming up the stairs to attack me. And they're really locked in there. And then I just go, right, and then what happens? And then I add an extra silly story to it. And then he crept up and waved his wand and turned you into some chocolate. And then they go next And eventually
Okay,
it
good.
becomes ridiculous and they start laughing.
Yeah.
And then we go back and we repeat it and we do it repeatedly over and over again. And we keep sending it into different places. So the brain starts going, instead of going, but what if a monster came up? And what if a monster came and attacked me? And what if a monster came and attacked me? It keeps finding multiple pathways out
Right.
of the loop.
That's good.
And it strikes me that, like, that's the thing about cycles and the but thing that you're sharing. The but what if this happens? Or but what if that happens? It's like a more refined adult appropriate version of that.
Yeah, well, it depends what you say after your butt.
That's true. That's true. That's
but I actually love that. You know, it's similar. I mean, I have a bunch of techniques. You know, I wrote a book with the amazing like Kelly Woods, and it was integrative hypnosis for kids and teens, and it was playing for change. And like that type of, you know, co-creative storytelling that gets sillier and sillier, you know, I think it does a lot. It actually does a lot more than I think you're thinking. So it is definitely, if you think in terms of these thought loops that we have or the stories that we tell, and they become habituated. They just become almost a default position if you keep doing it enough, because it's habituated. But when you start to send it off into a bunch of different ways, what you can think is happening in the brain is that you are blowing out what's known as the boundary conditions, right? Like here is this tight knit, you know, neural cluster. I'm trying to think of like terms that everyone would understand, you know, tight knit firing. And then you start to loosen it up and loosen it up and loosen it up. And the boundaries start to just, now I'm silly and I'm over here and now I'm chocolate and now I'm giggling. Right. And as soon as you can, it allow the neural network of the fear problem to be lit up, then everything you do once it's lit up is going to get re-encoded in. It's going to get reconsolidated into the brain. So laughter with the kid is doing more than you realize to bust through that actual stuck, habituated problem. Anyway. Sorry.
But I love that as well, because the idea of the first step to change is to light up the circuitry that you want to change.
You know, I'm a bit of a stickler for that. Yeah.
Oh, I do. But what I love is the idea that, you know, when anxiety, if it were to come, it's so lovely to see it as, this is the opportunity I have.
That's
to go somewhere else, rather than, oh no, it's here.
Being lit up, it's just an intellectual pursuit. It's an abstract, you know, issue. And quite often people come in and their anxiety is actually about the anxiety.
Yeah.
So it's not even, it's like a few steps removed. It's gone meta too. It's like, I work with a lot of psychiatrists who send me their patients, and you know, so they've had like anxiety disorders and panic attacks and things like that. And, you know, lots of extreme versions of these things. And, you know, what starts to happen is they just have this constant panic of the panic, fear of the fear. And the fear of the fear is actually so much greater than the actual fear, because the actual fear, again, has a duration.
Right.
Because
Absolutely.
It's an actual spike. But the fear, damn, that's like this amorphous, you know, abstract, heavy duty construct you're dragging around. Mm-hmm. Anyway, so yes, when you actually feel anxiety, that is an opportunity to fuck with it. And anything you do, I mean, you could literally do a jig. You know, you could do a cartwheel. You could like, you know, sing some ridiculous song and make yourself laugh. If you do that while the neural network of your anxiety pattern is up, then you're going to shake it up more than you think.
Love it. Love it, love it, love it. Right, let's have a look at, because I've had some questions here. Someone says, feeling... oh, no, that's the same question. Hold on. Trying to do... oh, here we go. Martin Andrews says... trying to do everything at the same time, I get stressed by worrying about running out of time.
Yeah, who can't relate to that?
Right.
So, I mean, obviously there's different ways of getting yourself. That's better. Now I can read it.
I thought that would help. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. So, Martin, one of the key ingredients here, just like we said, is like lighting up a neural network so that you can then mess with it. One of the things that we can do is when it's something like this, is we can reverse it. We can literally be like, whenever you use a technique and you're calm, from that calm place, you can ask yourself a question of, what is the next smallest step I can take? Right? Next smallest step. Because it's all we can ever do is the next smallest step. So this is one of like, this becomes a mantra when I'm doing coaching for people that have big projects and they get so big that they get overwhelmed. I mean, that is one of the key components to procrastination, right? Is that people, they have this thing. It's like, oh, I've got to write the book. No, you've got to write 3 fucking sentences. You think you can do that? You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
I have to, do this whole project. No, you just have to do the next smallest step. Now, for some people, Martin, they find that making lists, I'm not a list maker. I don't write anything down. I'm allergic to any kind of paperwork. But I've had some clients where that really helps them to organize their time. Some people, it's literally get yourself into a state and then ask, what is the next smallest step? And I'm sure like Howard has probably shared countless techniques to get you into a nice, relaxed state where you can then ask, right?
So I love this question as well. And I sometimes joke with people that, you've never ever looked at anyone in their eyes before. You've never done it. I would say the same thing to you, Melissa. You've never looked in anyone's eyes before. What you only ever done is look at someone's eye and then the other one and then the other one. You never look at
Look
eyes.
at me. I'm sitting here trying to I'm both of your eyes right now.
Really?
I am.
Of course she would say that.
You know that I just have to literally be like, is that true? Is it true?
No, but in all honesty, if people...
No, but I get it.
If you take your fingers, and everyone can try this, if you take your fingers and you put them up in front of you, and then try and look at your fingers together, both of them, you'll find that your attention gets pulled to one and then the other and then back to the other. And in the same way, Martin, it's one of these things that we have this illusion that we're trying to do everything at the same time. But if we can slow down our experience a little, we realize we're only ever doing one thing at a time. And I have a YouTube video on dealing with procrastination. And I think some of the useful hints that are there are worth repeating, which is, and I think there's 3 patterns that people run when we do procrastination, which are, and I sometimes joke with people, I say, listen, if you won a prize, right? If you won the most amazing prize, you've just won £1 million. Well, probably inflation needs to be more, £10 million. And you think about the day that you have to go to pick up the prize in the center of town. When you wake up in the morning, describe the actions to go and get that. And everyone says the same thing. They go, well, I throw my clothes on, I get in the car, and I go pick it up. I'm like, that's 3 things. They've chunked the whole list down to 3 things. They never say, I walk down the stairs, and then I put my left shoe on, and then I put my right shoe on, and then I walk to the front door, and then I unlock it. And then, but you ask someone about like doing their taxes, what are the steps for going and dealing with that task? And they always go, and it's so funny, they always go like, so I have to open my eyes. That's task 1. Like, crikey, that's not a task. I have to get up, stretch my arms, and they have a list of 30 fucking things. And then they wonder, it's like, this is the task list, So they have this whole like long list. It's like a comedy list. And then they wonder why they're feeling overwhelmed. And then the other comparison is then look at how the tone you use internally. The difference between going and getting the prize Oh, well, I get up, I go out, and I go pick it up. Woohoo! Like 3 steps in that. Whereas when they're doing their taxes, they go, I've got to open my eyes. I've got to get up out of bed. And they slow the whole system down. What they're communicating is that this is going to be laborious. This is going to be difficult. Rather than, and then one of the things that I think is important is people jump to the end result sometimes. And you hear people talk about the benefit of going to imagine it's done. Imagine it's already completed. And there's a really good book called Rethinking Positive Thinking by, I'm going to mispronounce the name now, Gabrielle Oettingen. And she talks about the danger of what we call premature achievement. And that sometimes if people get too associated into the end result, where they're going, oh, it's amazing, I've already done my taxes, it's brilliant, I've already made the millions of pounds. They have the feeling of having achieved it before they've actually achieved it. And now it robs them. They don't have to do it now in order to get the good feeling. So
Can I interrupt you here?
Yeah.
Because bring it back to what is the next smallest step? Because I use in my work, in my change work, I use milking the future as it's kind of like mining the future for the emotions. But the key component is to get the emotion. Oh yes, I signed my taxes, they're fucking done, right? There is this relief, there is the, oh, it's done. I've signed it, it's done. Feel this feeling. And now open up the file. Feel this feeling and now get out of bed, right? So as long as you are mining it for the emotion, taking the emotion, right? What I call a copy and paste, copying it from the future where this shit is done and pasting it to the next smallest step. That's a good use of the future. If you're just going to end with, oh, I've done it, it feels so good, and not actually utilize the energy of that end result, and it's pointless. And and for some people, the opposite of productive.
I love that and that use of it. And I think it would be really useful because sometimes I've had great merits in helping people not jump to the feeling of the end result, but picturing from a dissociated position the end result. So it's like they see the goal and they see they can do it, but they don't get to associate into the feeling until they get there.
Okay. I still think, just based on human nature, almost everything is emotionally state dependent.
Right.
So trying to get motivated from a dissociated position for me and many clients that I can think of that's a lot of work. And most people come to us, I feel, because they don't have the internally generated motivational system to get them there. And I find that cheating by grabbing the emotions and pasting it to the next smallest step to start that generator going, that's just, for me, what I found.
Yeah.
Because
I'm just wondering whether they can play together.
Of procrastination. I'm fucking so good at it.
Yeah, well, I'm just an amateur procrastinator.
What'd you say?
I'm just an amateur procrastinator, not a pro.
Oh, I am a pro.
Yeah.
I have many years of perfecting. There's a great book for the procrastinators out there called The Art of Procrastination. And he talks about strategic procrastination. Mm-hmm. And that is where you take this thing that you feel is kind of important, almost feels like there's a deadline, and you kind of put it at the top of the list. And then you can procrastinate on that. Like, I have this book that I'm perpetually never writing. And it's been at the top of the procrastination list for many years. But while I'm procrastinating that, I wrote 3 others.
I love that.
And I created a bunch of other programs. I did a bunch of other things, these digital things. They did it all so that I can continue to procrastinate on this thing that feels more important.
Love it.
Anyway, Strategic procrastination. Know,
great idea.
know your talents and know how to use them.
Beautiful. Perfect. Here we go. We've got a question here. Now, okay, there's two questions I want to deal with at once, actually. There's one that was pre-submitted, and it was about air hunger, which is, for those of you who don't know, it's that feeling that you can't take a full and satiating breath in. And often the illusion is people think that they're lacking oxygen, but actually it's the other way around. They're hypersensitive, more often than not, to carbon dioxide, and it creates this illusion. And the question...
Making me feel like I need to breathe. Okay.
Okay, there we go. So someone asked this question. I'm going to put both questions up in a moment. They said, I was inquiring on tips for handling air hunger, or, and here's the issue, hyper-awareness of my breath. It's very frustrating at times, and I cry out in frustration that I'm so in tune with how my body is breathing, and that's very characteristic. Often people become very almost overly consciously aware of their breathing, and things that should be outside of conscious awareness, they become hyper fixated on. So it was more around tips for that. And then I also noticed Sue says, I'm extremely health anxious. Any pain I have, I overthink and catastrophize. And the reason I've just put them both up is I think there are some similarities between health anxiety and the patterns that we run if we are health anxious, which is we often become hyperfixated on internal sensations, internal symptoms that many people would likely just not be paying attention to. It would just fade away. But if we get anxious about it, we become super hyper vigilant and are scanning the body the whole time, whether it's on our breathing, whether it's on pain, and then building into stories. So I guess it would be interesting to hear from you, Melissa, in terms of what could people do if they are hyper fixating about internal sensations?
I would go in the opposite direction. So, one of the things I've been into lately, I mean, I've always done it in various ways. Now I just know a little bit better what's happening in the brain when we do the things that, you and I have been practicing for many, many years. But I like this term that I just read, and it's from this book. The fuck is it called? Oh, Better in Every Sense. And it's by Farb and Siegel. And they have this term I love, and it's called sense foraging. And this is, so if someone is so hyper-focused internal, I would initially have them external, have exercises of like, what are 10 things I can visually see? Don't necessarily calculate, count them, but just really like be aware of your visual system. I would start to do random, physical, kinesthetic, sensory things, so that your only focus is on the sensory. What do I feel right here? What do I feel right here? What do I see? What do I hear? Right? The thing is, when you start to do this, it starts to bring fire away from, let's say for the first question, it's definitely like the amygdala. The limbic system is literally looping with the default mode network. And now it's that self-referential, what they call a house of habit, which I like that term too, for the default mode network. That is the shit that's going on when you're having this problem. So by sense foraging, by starting to really do things like that, something that is just engaging your sensory system, you're lighting up the different areas of the brain. And what that does is it starts to then calm the system over here, take some fire away from where it had been. But what they noticed is it has this cumulative effect of changing the habituated patterns in the house of habit. So sense foraging is one of the things that I would do. The other thing I tend to do, especially for air hunger, I've never heard that. Like, I just wouldn't call it that, but that's an interesting way to put it. I mean, I've heard, because I've worked with a lot of people with asthma and things like that. So that feeling that they need to take in more air, that they're not getting enough air. I like that you call it air hunger, because that's really, I guess, what it is. One of the things that used to work beautifully is EFT and tapping. And I don't know if you've shared this with them
I
or how
haven't
you
shared any
feel them.
tapping. It's kind of not my bag, but you do it beautifully in terms of the explanation and the way you present it.
Well, I mean, this was one of the things, went way back, God damn, I think, over 20 years ago, when I was first learning these techniques. And you know me, I like shiny new toys. I like to always gather new techniques, but I want to know, I take them apart. I want to know how they work, right? And I didn't necessarily buy what they said was happening.
Right.
Right, the energy system, I don't know, I didn't really. So I go and learn from the people that develop it. And then I go to conferences and I learn from as many people as I can. And I try and discern what the hell is going on. One of the things that they always used to say, to just test it, right? Before you even get into people's problems, is have them take a deep breath in. And then on 0 to 10, where would they put that? Right? Like, oh, I'm breathing at about, I guess, a 7 or an 8. If 10 would be a full lungs. And then they did this tapping, right? They would tap, and I won't do it here, but there's a gazillion YouTubes. I would do the faster tapping because I'm from New York, and and these are tapping on acupuncture points. Now, when you're doing this tapping and the old school one was like, I feel like I can't breathe. I feel like I can't breathe, which to a hypnotist seemed counterproductive, to be constantly repeating the thing we don't want to do. But it has an interesting effect as well. It kind of desensitizes us to the very thing. So tapping, and then it would be like, now take another deep breath in. And invariably, I've never had a single person not be able to breathe so much more. And that was just used as a test to show them what EFT was. So
Cool.
When you say this, that's what I think of. When I worked with people with asthma, EFT has stopped asthma attacks. It stopped panic attacks. So I've seen it in all these 20 years do things that I've never seen or thought possible with any one technique. And it tends to to be useful for, I'm going to say, over 90% of my clients. It's a rare client that it doesn't work for. But if it's a practitioner and it doesn't work for them, they never share it with their clients. They're just, that's not, they're like, didn't work. So, but because I teach and I spread it around, I get a lot more feedback, and it's just one of those. So EFT, that's what, you can go look at. And there's long versions, and you don't necessarily need the long version, but for some issues, I think it's good. But certainly the pattern interrupt of it, that's one of the things I would do for anxiety of all kinds. And when you overthink and you catastrophize all these symptoms, I mean, I would first go into the sensory. And by going into the sensory, you can use the sensory techniques. You're just literally focusing on hearing it, feeling it, right? Noticing where your fingers touch these points, and that becomes its own sense foraging. You know me, I like to double, triple things up. So
Right.
like, you know what I mean? It's like, if I'm going to teach my clients sense foraging, I'm going to wrap it up with a technique I know will stop anxiety.
Right.
And then we're getting two things going on.
Love it.
So
Love it.
those are some of the things, as well as, the cognitive approaches for that type of catastrophizing, which is to challenge it. Something even like, along the lines of like Byron Katie's work, which is to take it through is it true? Can you know for certain it's true? The answer is always no, I can't know for certain it's true. Or looking for counterexamples, the opposite being equally as true. Right?
So
When
I
people are like, oh my
often talk
God,
about
what if I
Byron
have
Katie.
cancer? It's like,
Yeah.
So then we take it through the steps of Byron Katie's work and it blows it right out, because the opposite is far more true than the belief.
Yep.
And when you have a visceral sense of that, when you actually go through it and feel the truth in that, it's different than just using it as an intellectual exercise.
Right. One of the things when it comes to sensations and hyperfixating is, I think, an interesting one to have some insight around, which is people see the sensation itself as really threatening. It's like, this sensation I have to get rid of. And as people who follow me a lot, I often point out the meta suggestion of I have to get rid of it almost fixes it in place as a threat response. And
Yes.
the age-old analogy of, if my son comes running into my bedroom one night and says, Daddy, there's a monster under my bed, it's not going to help him dramatically if I say, George, there's no monster, but whatever you do, don't look it in the eyes. Because in telling him he mustn't see it, right there and then we've added credibility to it. So I think helping and practicing people separating out what the sensations are and the story that you tell yourself about them, so that you don't see them as a threat in the same way, can be really useful. And there's a question that I often ask people, and it's worth, and I have a button here. Actually, this button is, I wish it said magic stop. It's actually, it says blah, blah. And it's for clients that start talking too long. And I just press the blah, blah button, because I've got a good bedside manner. That's why you should come and see me one-on-one,
I've got a horn that says bullshit.
Yeah, it came as a pack of two. I got to get them both, But here's the thing. I sometimes say, look, imagine you had a button, and this button, whenever you pressed it, it could just stop any unpleasant sensation that you had in the moment. It would just immediately stop. If you had that button with you at all times, how afraid of the sensation would you be? And not one person has ever said, oh, I'd still be afraid. They always go, well, I wouldn't be.
Right.
And that's really fascinating if people can kind of really get the insight that's sitting there for them, which is it's not the feeling that's a threat. It's the story that they add to it of, what if it lasts? What if it gets worse? What if I can't get through it? What does it mean? And so on. And therefore...
Well, can I just share as well? Because I just did this with a client today, where, it's the feeling and the fear of the feeling, as you say, and it just becomes this, locked in because of the fear. And quite often all I have is, okay, drop right to the center of it and just sit. Just sit and notice what happens. Now I know that we've got 90 seconds, right? So when we're talking about anxiety and things like that and fear, but the meta message to the unconscious mind, which, your brain doesn't give a shit how comfortable you are.
Right.
It cares. Are you alive? Did you survive? Mm-hmm. Somewhere along the line, we have flagged certain things, right? So that the brain thinks they are a danger to your very existence. So by sitting with something and surviving, or I take them through different processes and techniques where they not only sit with it and survive, but we get to some deep core positive, feelings. And so then they're actually thriving. But just the survival alone is enough to update the brain's predictive nature. So your brain runs on prediction, right? So that you feel how you felt. You can be how you've been, because your brain is always conserving energy. And if you start to defy those, put in a prediction error, you start to defy what the brain was predicting, like, oh, I'm going to feel this feeling, then I'm going to go catastrophizing and freak out, mm-hmm. and this is my pattern, and this is what I fucking do. And instead you feel this feeling and you just sit with it.
Right.
I think, you mentioned the like nightmare or monsters, like think about like running from monsters in your dreams and finally stopping running and being like, okay, fine, have at it. You know, it's kind
Right.
of like that when you just allow yourself to just feel it. Yeah, do your damage. Go ahead, do your worst. And the
Well,
truth is, yeah.
so I often share there's a lovely equation from Shinzen Young. He talks about he's a mindfulness expert American guy, and I always joke with people that if you hear the name Shinzen Young, how
You
you've
don't
just
think it's
pictured him, that's not what he looks like. 100%. Yep. Yeah, and then you go to look him up, and it's like not at all that. But he's got this lovely equation, which is experience multiplied by resistance equals suffering. If you resist the images, the words, the sensations in your mind, you're labeling them as a threat, and you end up having suffering. And I think there's so much power in just allowing yourself to sit with or be willing to have or accept. And I always make the point, if I use the word acceptance, I don't mean accept in the way that people seem to take it these days. People seem to use acceptance as resignation. Oh, I guess it's just that's how it's going to be. But accept originally comes from the old Latin acceptere, which means to receive willingly. And it's the gift we receive. It's the gift of giving ourselves, surrendering essentially to reality. And to quote Byron Katie, because you just mentioned it, it's my favorite quote of all of them, which is, I think it's, if you argue with reality, you'll lose, but only 100% of the time.
But only ever all the time.
Yeah. And so,
you know, can I just add this
yeah.
other idea that really helps me, helps my clients, you know, and it speaks to this, you know, locking things in place, right? If all we are, as my friend John is always, his bumper sticker is, all we are is always changing, right? And on biochemical, on every level, really, that is true. On a molecular level, all we are, every breath in, every breath out, we're always changing. And life is this continuum of flow. And what happens is we have a moment, we call it a problem. And it's like we freeze frame a still, or maybe a GIF or GIF, however you want to say it.
I'm not
and
getting
then
into that debate.
Don't. And then we keep looking at it. Here's this moment in time that we keep freezing. But the truth is, it's embedded in the long movie of our lives. So quite often I do a lot of work to kind of get that, you know, those frames back into the whole. And it's literally the freezing of a moment, the freezing of time, the solidifying of something that we then call a symptom. That is the crux of all of our problems. And that, I think, goes with that quote really well, because it is the resistance of just allowing experience to move, you know, that is what separates the animals from us. They just flow through whatever the hell. They get hit by a vehicle and then shake it off and keep moving. They're not going to sit there reliving that fucking thing and just they move through it. And we don't, we got that part of our brain that just likes to rehash, relive, and then worry about it. And then the worry itself becomes an additional layer that helps to lock it in. Anyway.
I sometimes joke that I think this brain that we have, it was great and it worked so well for how it was originally meant to be, but society has evolved far quicker than our brain has evolved. And essentially it's like we're living today with today's software with Windows 95. And we keep getting the blue screen of death every so often. Like, that's just what happens. It's going to crash out.
Well, that would explain earlier today when I swear to God, my brain was going like this.
Right.
And it was just waiting.
We've had a great question. I've got a comment on this. Andrew, about 10 minutes after we finished the whole piece on procrastination, wrote, any ideas on procrastination? And I can't help but wonder whether, you just meant to write that earlier and we're just putting it off until we'd finished. What I would say is if you've just tuned in and you're asking, that's there's a fair bit unpacked on that one. So go back, watch the replay. That should be there.
And also, you said that you have older videos on procrastination, and I actually have like a YouTube channel as well, where I believe my daughter always posts the videos. That I have a 3-part series on procrastination as well.
Excellent.
Maybe that's just on
Do that
Instagram,
later.
but I think it was there. Yeah, do that later. Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I was watching QI recently, and they did a whole funny thing about the fact that there is a procrastination society, and they always meet up 4 weeks after. Apparently, it's true. You can pay however much money it is and be part of the procrastination society. And there's all sorts of comical things that they send you late. Like in June, you get the Christmas card and all sorts of funny stuff.
That's funny.
I love that. Yeah. Go on. We'll do. I'm just looking at the time. Should we do one more? You all right for time?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, it's fine.
Hayden Whittingham says, here we go. I'm going to shrink it down just there you go. Hayden Whittingham says, how do I stop caring about what other people think about me or how I think they perceive me? I get very overwhelmed and absorbed, and it stops me from doing things I really enjoy.
I mean, I would say the first thing is to realize most people aren't. They just aren't thinking about you in the way that you think they are, because everyone is the star of their own fucking show.
Yeah.
Right. And sometimes you can be like a co-star, but more often you're just an extra. And once you really get that, see, the thing is, being a change worker for so long and working on different, social anxieties and things like that, I have seen enough to convince me of the truth in what I say. People are not thinking about you.
Right.
They're just thinking about themselves. And most people are equally as neurotic about what you think about them. And there you are, simply worried about what people are thinking about you. And when you really own that and you really get it, and you realize that most people just don't have the bandwidth to be so concerned about you.
So my mum used to say, I grew up with this quote. She used to say, at 20, you worry what people think about you. At 40, you don't worry what people think about you. And at 60, you realize they weren't thinking about you in the first place.
Yes.
And I think there's such truth there. And all of it. And you said, what do I care? How do I stop caring about what other people think? I think it's the realization for me that's really helped is that my thoughts of other people, that's not other people. That's just images in my head. It has nothing to do with the other person. And then the comedy then goes is for me to feel judged by someone else or awkward about what someone else is thinking. I have to do this. I have to construct an image in my mind of another person. Forget that I've made that shit up and then feel like it's real. But more than that, I have to imagine the person that I've made up has a thought of me. And I'm not even my own thought of me in my own head. How can I be the thought in the fictional character's head that I've just fucking made up? And it just gets so ridiculous that my brain just goes, screw it. I think my wife finds me intensely infuriating. I know we're live, and I'm not sure I should say this out publicly, but there's a group of girls that she's friends with, and the husbands do not necessarily get on. And every so often, she goes, we all have to go out, and the husbands are invited. And I used to go along and play the game and like small talk, and oh God, I can't bear those evenings. So one time, I think I just had enough, and she comes and she says, 6 months later, we've been invited. The husbands are coming with this time. It's about time. And I went, enjoy yourself. And she went, you're coming. And I went, no, I'm not. And then she said something really interesting. She went, if you don't, they'll think you're weird. And I said, I'm okay with that. I am. And I even went further. I said, no, think about it like this. They're sitting around dinner, and I'm not there. They might have that little giggly feeling as they talk about and imagine me being a certain character. That's all their issue. But they'll enjoy that like little bitchy feeling. Meanwhile, I'll be at home, eating pizza, watching a film, enjoying myself. This way, everyone enjoys themselves. Like, that's all right with me. So I think really kind of stepping into the lunacy of like, hang on, I'm just making up someone and making up what they're thinking and has no bearing on me at all. I think can really help snap people out of that kind of that thing. And perhaps,
and the other thing is, I mean, because everyone is at a different place in where they are in that type of realization. But I feel like most of us have, maybe in some movie that we've watched, a kind of role model for someone that really just doesn't give a fuck, right? They just don't give a fuck. And how nice would it be if you just didn't give a fuck? You just did what you did. And I would just really I would play with that. I would look at, just try it on, just play with it. Play with this idea that most people aren't thinking about you anyway. And then play with this idea of this person who's finally evolved enough to not give a shit. Right, Tupac, fine, exactly. And then emulate that, right? I mean, it's funny because for the first time in a long time, I've had to deal with something like yesterday, because I've been posting a lot of politics, and I did a free class called resistance training to help people to do the things they need to do in this crazy world. And not to go into that, but what happens is you start to get, when you're visible and you start to do these things, you start to get like, you become the focus of certain people. So when you're like, people aren't thinking about you, it's like, and then you get all these like comments of like, ludicrous comments, like whatever, stop whining and shut your mouth. And you know what I mean? And that impetus that I felt to actually reply, it was a marvel. And here's what I did, right? I felt that, right? I'm a New Yorker. Like, I'm used to the fuck you, no fuck you, no fuck, it's like, I'm used to that type of immediate clapback. But I recognized that would be giving airtime to this, that would be giving energy to someone who's in no place to actually hear it. They're not there for a political, intellectual discourse. They really aren't. to point out the flaws in their non-logic. It's a waste of energy and a waste of time. But I felt that impulse, right? This is all about, what do people think, right? So I'm still answering the question. And instead, I just got curious about it. Like, wow, And then I started to analyze it a little bit, like evolutionarily, being like part of the herd, right? We're herd animals still. And so none of us wants to feel misunderstood or ostracized, because that used to mean death, but it doesn't anymore. You know what I mean? And we're herd animals, but we get to choose, So for me, I had this, and it was the first time I've had it in years, because I am one of those people that genuinely, typically, don't give a fuck, But then I noticed yesterday I did. So it was kind of like an internal reckoning of like, of identity, of like, wait, why is this pissing me off so much? Why is every impulse wanting to like slam back, and then what? For what purpose? To just be re-engaged. And anyway, sometimes getting curious about yourself and really like examining it, like, ooh, that was interesting. That response is interesting. I find curiosity is almost the opposite of anxiety. Like for me, curiosity is my superpower. It's like, it's the thing that keeps me in this minefield damn near 30 years. It's the thing that fuels my day. So if you're watching this because you have anxiety, sometimes just get curious about it. Like, what way does it move? That's interesting. And if you can bring curiosity, because think about it, it's damn near impossible to feel fear and curiosity at the same time. Curiosity is a natural tendency to lean you forward. Fear pushes back. And I always joke that like my father used to say, I'm curious why you think you can come in here at 1 a.m, and I'm like, he's not curious. That's not curiosity.
No.
But actual curiosity where you just allow yourself to be curious. That was an interesting response I just had. Like, that's an interesting feeling that I have. And that is how I approach almost everything, especially when it comes to my own shit, because we all have our shit.
Right.
Just anxiety just isn't one of mine. I got other stuff. Anyway.
I totally agree. I think this is lovely. And I love the insights. I love it all. By the way, Andrew, who asked for procrastination tips, more has been revealed on that saga, which is, he writes, "Oh my gosh, hilarious. I fell into a post-dinner coma nap and I've just woken up having missed it." Thank you, Andrew. Thank you. I love that. Yeah. Datsparaza says, when he says Tupac is his role model, maybe rethinking when he points out he died.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
you
mean,
know, so
did a lot of other
work.
role models, you know?
Yeah. But listen, it's been absolutely fantastic having you. And I'm so pleased that you could come and share all of this stuff with people. If people ask and they say, well, two things. They go, one, where can we find out more about her? How can we join her tribe and see her channel? Where can they go? What can they do?
So my website is melissatears.com, and that's for practitioners out there, if you know, or I still have a private practice. But I show up on Instagram. Kind of, that's really one of the only social medias. I mean, I'm on Facebook, but that's hit or miss with me. I tend to ignore it for a while, but Instagram is just my name, Melissa Tears. Yeah, and I have a YouTube channel. I think it's just Melissa Tears, but I don't know.
Okay.
I don't pay too much attention.
I will put the details in the show notes when it goes out as a replay.
All right, awesome.
That's cool. Andrew, lots of people are saying lots of nice stuff, lots of great stuff, except when he fell asleep. Looking forward to watching the replay. Absolutely. This has been brilliant. Thanks for getting together to do this. Made lots of notes. Awesome. Thank you both. Really good. Excellent. Really, really pleased. And I'm sure if people say, I can't promise, but if they say, Melissa, would you come back sometime and do this again another time? Would you be open to that?
Sure. Yeah. This is
awesome.
Fun stuff.
Perfect. All right. Listen, I'm going to click end and we will see you all next month. And Melissa, hopefully we'll get you back at some point soon.
All right. Have a good one.
All the best, everyone.